The night was calm and the mansion stood in silence, surrounded by the soft hum of city lights. Inside, the young billionaire returned home after another long day filled with business meetings and hollow smiles. Success was everywhere around him: glass walls, polished marble floors, and priceless paintings. Yet his heart felt emptier with each passing day. He had built everything from the ground up, but in the process he had forgotten what it meant to feel truly alive. As he entered his home, something unusual caught his attention. A faint sound echoed through the hallway, soft like a whisper or a breath. At first he ignored it, thinking it was the wind slipping through the large windows. But then it came again, a quiet sob, barely noticeable but real. His steps slowed as he followed the sound. Each echo of his shoes against the marble felt heavier than the last. He reached the corner of the hall where a curtain slightly moved even though there was no breeze. He hesitated, wondering if his mind was just playing tricks on him. Slowly he pulled the curtain aside and there she was. A young girl, barely in her late teens, crouched behind the curtain, her clothes torn and her face pale with fear. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Clutching a small piece of bread that she must have taken from the kitchen, the billionaire froze, unable to understand what he was seeing. For a moment, silence filled the air. She didn't speak and he couldn't find words. It was as if two worlds had collided, his world of luxury and her world of struggle, right there in that single moment. Finally, he took a slow breath and asked softly, "What are you doing here?" Her lips trembled. She looked around as if searching for a way to escape. I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please don't call anyone. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just needed a place to stay for one night." Her voice was weak but honest. He could hear the exhaustion behind her words, the kind of tiredness that came from more than just lack of sleep. It was the exhaustion of life itself. He looked around, trying to understand how she had even gotten inside. His mansion had cameras, security guards, everything. But none of that mattered now. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of pain and innocence that stopped him from getting angry. Instead of shouting or calling security, he said quietly, "You're safe. No one will hurt you here. Just tell me why you're hiding." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Her hand shook as she tried to hold back her emotions. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," she finally said. "I used to come near this place when I was looking for food in the trash bins behind the wall. I saw how big it was, and I thought maybe, if I could just sleep here one night, I'd be safe." Her words pierced through him like a blade. He had always lived surrounded by walls of gold and silence. Yet he had never realized that right outside those walls, someone was suffering, someone desperate enough to hide inside his house just to survive. He didn't know what to say. For years he had believed his success was everything, but looking at her, scared and trembling, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: empathy. He took a deep breath and said, "When did you last eat?" She hesitated, unsure if she could trust him. "2 days ago," she murmured. Without another word, he turned and walked to the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with a plate of food and a bottle of water. She stared at the plate as if it was something she had never seen before. He placed it on the table gently and stepped back. "It's okay," he said softly. "Eat." Her eyes filled with tears as she took the first bite. Each chew seemed to release a pain she had been carrying for too long. He watched silently, feeling his chest tighten with emotions he couldn't explain. As she ate, he noticed the small scars on her hands, the dirt under her nails, and the way her shoulders hunched as if she was always ready to be hurt. This wasn't just a random girl. This was someone who had seen life's cruelty far too soon. He didn't ask more questions that night. He just let her finish, then offered her a blanket and a couch to sleep on. She hesitated, looking at him in disbelief. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. He paused, looking away. "Because I should have noticed long ago," he replied softly. "No one deserves to hide just to feel safe." That night, as he walked to his room, the mansion didn't feel so empty anymore. For the first time in years, there was something human in that silent space. The sound of someone breathing softly, finally resting after endless nights of fear. He didn't know who she really was or what her story would unfold into, but one thing was clear. His life was about to change forever. The morning light filtered through the tall glass windows, painting soft golden lines across the marble floor. The billionaire woke up earlier than usual, the memory of the frightened girl still resting heavy in his thoughts. He wasn't sure if she was still there or if she had slipped away before sunrise. A part of him almost hoped she hadn't gone, not because he needed her presence, but because something inside him needed to understand her pain. He stepped into the living room, and there she was, sitting quietly on the edge of the couch, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her eyes were open, tired but calm, as if she hadn't slept at all. She looked at him the moment he entered, her expression a mix of guilt and gratitude. "You didn't run away," he said gently, breaking the silence. She lowered her gaze. "I didn't want to. You were kind to me, and I didn't want to steal from someone who helped me." He nodded, noticing how fragile her voice sounded, like every word took effort. "You don't owe me anything," he replied softly. "But if you're ready, maybe you can tell me how you ended up here." She looked up, her eyes filled with hesitation. "It's a long story," she said. "I have time," he answered quietly. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "I wasn't always like this. I had a family once. My father worked in a small shop and my mother used to sew clothes for people in the neighborhood. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Until one day my father got sick. We tried everything, but we couldn't afford the treatment. He died a few months later, and my mother—" Her voice cracked and she looked away, blinking back tears. "She tried to stay strong for me, but the bills kept coming, and the landlord didn't care about our situation. We lost our home. After that, everything just fell apart." He listened in silence, his chest tightening with every word. She wasn't dramatic or overly emotional. Her tone was simple, almost too calm, and that made it even more painful to hear. "I started sleeping on the streets," she continued. "At first I thought it would only be for a few days. I looked for work, but no one wanted to hire someone who didn't have a proper address or clean clothes. I tried washing dishes, selling flowers, anything. But some nights it was just too hard. The streets are not kind to girls like me." Her hands trembled as she spoke, and he could see the weight of her memories pressing down on her. He didn't interrupt. "One night," she said softly, "I saw this mansion. I used to pass by it often. It looked safe. I thought maybe if I could hide inside for one night, I could rest without worrying about anyone hurting me." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know it belonged to someone like you." He leaned back, speechless for a moment. The thought of her hiding in the shadows of his wealth, while he lived surrounded by comfort, made him feel small. "Did anyone else ever try to help you?" he asked gently. She gave a faint, sad smile. "Some people gave me food. Some ignored me. Others said things that hurt more than hunger. You're the first person who didn't look at me like I was a problem." That simple line hit him harder than he expected. He had met countless people, investors, businessmen, partners, but none of them had ever said words that carried so much truth. He looked at her and saw not just a girl in pain, but a mirror reflecting everything he had ignored about the world outside his gates. He stood up and walked toward the window, trying to collect his thoughts. "You shouldn't have to live like this," he said quietly. "No one should," she didn't reply. She just watched him, unsure of what to say. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just the quiet hum of the morning filled the air. Finally, he turned to her. "I can help you. Not just with food or shelter, but to start again." Her eyes widened. "Why?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." He smiled faintly, a sad kind of smile. "Maybe because I know what loneliness feels like," he said. "Money doesn't protect you from that." Tears filled her eyes again, and she shook her head slowly. "I don't want your pity." "It's not pity," he said softly. "It's a chance." "Everyone deserves one." She didn't answer right away. She looked at the floor, then at him again. "If I accept your help, what do you expect from me?" "Nothing," he replied simply. "Just honesty." The room fell silent once more, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Two broken souls sitting in the same space, both realizing that sometimes fate brings people together, not by accident, but by need. He poured her a cup of tea and sat across from her. The mansion no longer felt cold. The emptiness in the walls seemed to fade, replaced by something human, something real. As the morning sun grew brighter, the girl took a sip of tea and whispered quietly, "No one has ever listened to me like this before." He smiled softly and said, "Then today is a new beginning." Neither of them knew what the future held, but for the first time in years, he felt alive, not because of his wealth, but because he had finally found a reason to care again. The days passed quietly after that morning. The girl stayed in the mansion, though still unsure if she truly belonged there. Every corner of the place seemed too big, too shiny, too distant from the world she had known. She often sat near the window, watching the garden, her mind drifting between gratitude and fear. The billionaire, on the other hand, found his daily routine unexpectedly changed. He no longer rushed to meetings or answered endless phone calls without thought. There was something different about having another soul in that empty mansion, someone who wasn't there for money or power, but for survival. It made him see things differently. One afternoon he found her standing in the hallway, staring at one of the old portraits hanging on the wall. It was a painting of his father, a man known for his wealth and strictness, someone who believed that success came before compassion. The billionaire's expression softened as he saw her lost in thought. "You're staring at that portrait," he said gently. "Do you like it?" She turned to him, startled. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," he interrupted, smiling faintly. "That's my father. He built most of this empire." Her eyes widened slightly. "Your father?" she whispered. She stared at the painting again, her face showing something more than curiosity, something like recognition. He noticed it instantly. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, her hands tightening around the blanket she held. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "He just looks familiar, that's all." He tilted his head, sensing she wasn't telling the full truth. "Familiar how?" She looked down, avoiding his gaze. "I think I've seen him before. When I was little, my mother used to work for a rich family, cleaning, washing clothes, helping in the kitchen. Maybe it was here." The billionaire's eyes widened a little. "Your mother worked here?" She nodded slowly. "I'm not sure. I was very small then. But I remember this house. The big doors, the long hall, the smell of the garden in the morning. My mother always told me not to touch anything. She said rich people don't like when poor children walk around their houses." Her words pierced him. He remembered his childhood vaguely, always seeing workers around, people who cleaned silently and left before night. He never paid attention to them. His father had taught him not to. "What was your mother's name?" he asked softly. The girl took a deep breath. "She used to be called Hannah," she said. "Hannah Iqbal." He froze. The name hit something deep in his memory. A faint recollection of a woman who once worked for his family many years ago. She was quiet, kind, and always greeted him politely when he was a boy. His father had fired her suddenly after an argument over a small mistake. Something about a broken vase, if he remembered correctly. He swallowed hard. "I remember that name," he said. "Your mother. She used to work for us." Her eyes widened. "You remember her?" He nodded slowly, guilt washing over him like a tide. "Yes, my father wasn't a kind man. I remember she left crying one day. I didn't know why. I was too young, and I never asked." Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "That day ruined everything for us. After she lost that job, we couldn't pay rent anymore. We moved from place to place until she got sick." Her voice broke. She never recovered. He stood there in silence, unable to find words. He had always believed his success was built on hard work. But now he realized it had also been built on the pain of people like her mother, people his father had stepped over without care. The girl wiped her tears quickly, trying to hide her emotions. "I shouldn't have said that," she whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't your fault," but he shook his head. "Maybe not directly," he said quietly. "But I lived inside this world blind to what was happening around me. My father hurt people, and I continued his legacy without ever questioning it." The silence between them grew heavy. She looked at him with eyes full of compassion, not anger. "You've already done more than anyone else ever did," she said softly. "You gave me food. You listened. That's more kindness than I've seen in years." He turned away for a moment, staring out the window. The sky outside was turning orange with sunset, painting the mansion walls with a warm glow. "Kindness doesn't erase what's broken," he murmured. "But maybe it's a start." The girl nodded slowly. "My mother used to say something," she said, her voice trembling. She said one act of goodness can heal a wound that money never could. He looked back at her, his eyes softening. She was a wise woman. A tear slipped down her cheek as she smiled faintly. She would have been happy to know that someone remembered her. He took a slow breath, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't just remember her. I think she taught me more now through you than I ever learned from my father. For the first time, she smiled, not out of joy but out of relief, as if some invisible weight had lifted from her shoulders. That evening, the mansion no longer felt like a monument of wealth. It felt like a place of memories, of mistakes, forgiveness and second chances. But deep down, he knew there was still something she hadn't told him. Something in her eyes that held a deeper sadness. A truth yet to be spoken. And when she finally revealed it, it would change both their lives forever. That night, the mansion was quiet again. The air was heavy, as if the walls themselves could feel the weight of everything that had been said. The billionaire sat alone in his study, the lights dimmed, staring at the portrait of his father. The girl's words kept echoing in his mind. My mother worked here. She lost everything after that. He felt a strange mix of anger, guilt, and sorrow. For years he had believed he inherited greatness, but now he understood that part of that greatness was built on someone else's suffering. The truth was a mirror, and it wasn't easy to look into. Suddenly there was a soft knock on the door. He turned, and the girl stood there holding the same blanket around her shoulders. Her face was pale, but her eyes seemed calmer, as if she had made a difficult decision. Can I talk to you? She asked quietly. He nodded, motioning for her to sit. She hesitated, then spoke, her voice trembling. There's something I didn't tell you. The real reason I came here. He leaned forward, listening carefully. When my mother got sick, she continued. She used to whisper your father's name in her sleep. She wasn't angry, she was heartbroken. She said he wasn't a bad man at first, but he changed when he became rich. She kept one thing with her till the end, a small letter. Her fingers tightened around the blanket as tears formed in her eyes. Before she died, she told me to find this mansion one day. She said someone here needed to hear her truth. I didn't understand what she meant until I saw you that night. He frowned softly. Her truth? She nodded. She said she forgave him. Your father, even after everything. She said no amount of pain should turn a good heart into stone. And she wanted me to tell his son not to make the same mistake. The room fell silent. He felt his throat tighten, his eyes burning with unshed tears. She forgave him, he whispered almost to himself. The girl nodded. Yes, and she wanted me to forgive too. That's why I came here. Not for food or shelter, but to do what she couldn't. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He stood up slowly, unable to speak. His entire life he had chased success to prove himself worthy of his father's legacy. But now, standing before this fragile girl, the daughter of someone his father had wronged, he realized that true worth had nothing to do with money or power. He looked at her, his voice breaking. Your mother was a better person than all of us combined. She smiled weakly through her tears. She just believed love heals everything. And in that moment, something inside him broke, not from pain but from awakening. For the first time, he understood what it truly meant to be rich. The following morning, the sun rose slowly, spreading its soft light across the mansion. The billionaire hadn't slept at all. He sat near the window in silence, his thoughts tangled in everything the girl had said. Her mother's forgiveness, her pain, her courage, all of it felt too big for him to process. For years he had believed that wealth was a shield, something that protected him from the world's sadness. But now he realized that it had only built walls that kept others out and kept his own heart locked inside. As the golden light filled the room, he made a quiet decision. Things couldn't stay the same. Not after hearing her story, not after feeling what he felt that night. He found her sitting in the kitchen, sipping tea from a small cup. She looked peaceful for the first time since she had arrived. When she saw him, she smiled gently as if she already knew he had something to say. I've been thinking, he said softly, about everything you told me. She placed the cup down and nodded. I didn't mean to upset you. You didn't, he said quickly. You made me see the truth. He paused for a moment, then continued. For so long I lived believing success was all that mattered. But what's the point of success if it doesn't make anyone's life better? She listened quietly, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. I want to do something, he said firmly. Something that matters. Not for image, not for business, but for real. What do you mean? She asked softly. I want to start a foundation, he replied. A place that helps people like your mother, women who've been forgotten by society, who lost everything because no one gave them a chance. Her eyes widened. You'd do that? He nodded. I have more than enough. And I've wasted years living for nothing but numbers and profit. Maybe it's time to build something that heals, not just earns. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then tears filled her eyes. If my mother could see you now, she whispered, she'd smile. He smiled faintly too, though his heart ached. Maybe this is her way of smiling, through you. The following weeks brought change to the mansion. The once silent halls filled with voices, volunteers, staff, and people in need. He transformed one entire wing of his estate into a shelter, a place where struggling women and children could find food, safety, and education. The girl stayed by his side through it all. She helped organize the rooms, talked to the newcomers, and shared her own story to give others hope. She no longer looked afraid. There was confidence in her steps now, and a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. One evening after a long day of work, the billionaire walked through the newly built shelter and saw her teaching a group of children how to read. They sat on the floor laughing softly as she helped them pronounce words. He stood quietly at the door, just watching, realizing that this was what peace truly looked like. Later, when the children had left, he approached her with a gentle smile. You've changed this place more than I ever could, he said. She shook her head. No, you gave it life. You gave us a chance. He looked at her thoughtfully. You gave me one too, he replied. They stood in silence for a moment, the evening sun glowing through the windows. She finally said, when I first came here, I was so scared. I thought you'd throw me out, but instead you listened. I'll never forget that, he smiled. And I'll never forget that you reminded me what being human really means. Months passed and the foundation grew. It became known across the city, the Hana Foundation, named after her mother. It helped hundreds of families, giving them food, shelter, and a path to a better future. The billionaire stopped attending grand parties and business events. Instead, he spent his days working with people who had stories just like hers. Every time he saw someone smile after finding hope again, he felt his heart heal a little more. But he still thought often about her mother's words, the message of forgiveness that had changed everything. One night, while sitting in his office, he found an old photo of his father. He looked at it for a long time. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, only understanding. His father had lived in fear of losing control, fear of weakness, and that fear had cost him his soul. He whispered softly, I forgive you. It wasn't for his father's sake, it was for his own peace. A year later, the mansion no longer looked like a symbol of wealth. It had become a home filled with laughter, footsteps, and the sound of new beginnings. The girl who once hid in fear now walked with confidence, helping others the way someone had helped her. One afternoon, as they stood together watching the children play in the garden, she turned to him and said, Do you ever wonder why I ended up here, out of all places? He looked at her, smiling softly. Maybe fate brought you here. Or maybe your mother did, she smiled. Maybe both. They stood there quietly, side by side, watching the sunlight dance on the grass. For the first time in his life, he felt something that money could never give him. Peace. The girl looked at him and said gently, You know, you've changed a lot. He nodded. You did too. But maybe we didn't change. Maybe we just finally found who we were meant to be. She laughed softly. My mother was right. Love really can heal anything. He looked at her with a faint smile. She was right about everything. As the day slowly faded into evening, the two of them stood together, not as a billionaire and a poor girl, but as two souls who had saved each other in ways neither could have imagined. In the end, it wasn't the mansion that mattered, or the wealth that surrounded them. It was the moment their worlds collided, the night he found her hiding, scared and hungry, yet carrying a message powerful enough to change a heart built on stone. That message, her mother's last words, had done something money never could. It broke his heart, only to rebuild it into something better. And as he watched the stars appear in the sky, he whispered softly, almost to himself, Thank you for getting lost in my mansion that night. The girl smiled through her tears, her voice calm and full of warmth. Maybe I wasn't lost, she said. Maybe I was meant to find you.